Things finally came to a head when all this chaos caused a complete economic collapse known as the Great Depression. With the economy in a state of total disarray, and America being just a few bad months away from a full-on revolution, there had to be changes to save the Republic. Just like today, where it isn't working and we have to do something different, back during the Great Depression it became clear that it wasn't working and we had to do something different. It was not so much that the American system had failed, as that it hadn't been taken to its logical conclusion. It was necessary for the public to guide and shape the nation's economic development for the good of the Republic. Then it was also necessary for the public to have a say in matters of economic power for the good and stability of the Republic. Just as there had to be planning and management and guidance to ensure that the American economy developed industry, there had to be management and planning and guidance to ensure that the goods produced by the American economy were distributed in a way that ensured everyone was able to have a fair share, and people who put in an honest day's work were able to have an honest day's pay. In the midst of this crisis, Franklin Roosevelt took office as president, and he implemented a reform program known as the New Deal, designed to rebalance power in America and get the economy and the country back on the right track. And it would be Roosevelt's New Deal, the newest evolution of the American system, that would define American politics for the next 50 years, up until the beginning of the Reagan-Clinton era. While the reforms Roosevelt made as part of the New Deal were many, most of them involving the government taking a bigger role in the economy in order to promote recovery from the Depression, its most important long-term impact was that the New Deal rebalanced power within American politics and the American economy. Unions, whose treatment had previously ranged from bare toleration to harsh persecution, were brought into government through the Wagner Act and the National Labor Relations Act. The working class was now organized and now could stand together and compete with big business interests for influence in the government. Workers had regained their citizenship and now would have a say in their country's future, in their pensions, and in their workplace. And throughout the New Deal era, the workers were able to use their newfound political power to ensure that presidents, senators, and representatives were elected who were willing to listen to the needs of the working class and pass policy that was good for the country as a whole, not just for business interest. And so throughout the New Deal era, we don't see the type of extreme and crazy and far out there trade policies that we see today. And the changes and rebalancing of power brought by the New Deal completely revitalized American society, just as much as the war against Britain or the end of slavery did. Pushed forward by Roosevelt's reforms and America's entry into World War II, America's economy and industry came roaring back, dealing the Japanese and the Germans a decisive blow in World War II. It was not just that the New Deal reforms revitalized the American economy and American industry, just in time for us to win World War II and protect our homeland from German and Japanese imperialism. The New Deal also revitalized American society, creating the conditions which birthed a golden age of American culture, American republicanism, and American community. The successful government policy that came out of the war made it possible for people to build families, to have kids, to build communities, to work to improve politics within their own community and within the Republic as a whole. Roosevelt's New Deal government programs did not destroy freedom, but created a new birth of freedom. People now had power and they had security. They could negotiate their own lives, go out and work and make an honest day's pay for an honest day's labor. And this gave them the opportunity to build a better country, to build better communities, to fight to end social ills that plagued America since the beginning of the Republic, to push our Republic to the highest point it's ever seen. Within just a few decades, the Civil Rights Movement, in alliance with America's unions, would succeed in dismantling centuries of legal racial oppression against African Americans. And President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program would succeed in cutting the poverty rate in half and bringing infrastructure and development to rural and outlying regions that had been left behind by America's previous economic developments. Now, I'm not trying to say that the New Deal era was perfect, as even the best moments in history have their flaws. And so, for example, the government was too slow to put trade restrictions back on Germany and Japan after those countries had successfully rebuilt themselves from World War II. And to some extent, the New Deal programs never went far enough, as there is still poverty in large parts of the United States, and many workers were still ununionized. But for the most part, it was the best moment in American history so far. An honest day's work earned an honest day's pay, and the future was very bright for the average citizen and for the country as a whole. However, there were always a group of radicals who opposed the New Deal and really the American system that the New Deal evolved out of. Powerful business interests like the Kochs and political ideologues like Barry Goldwater saw the New Deal as an affront to freedom. In their view, by bringing the workers into government and creating a more structured economic system, Roosevelt had destroyed freedom and turned America into a sort of quasi-socialist nation. But for all their bluster about how government and labor were on the back of business and how they represented true American freedom, the radicals weren't fighting for freedom so much as they were fighting for freedom for the business interest, for the upper middle class. Their goal was to undo the New Deal, put workers back in their place, and ensure that the country was controlled by a small slice of the citizenry, just as it had been before Roosevelt's odious and tyrannical reforms. But until the 1970s, this anti-New Deal ideology was on the fringe of political opinion. When Republican presidents won elections, they weren't Reaganists, they weren't Clintonists, they were New Dealers. Eisenhower and Nixon, they supported Social Security, they supported Roosevelt's reforms. They agreed that workers should have a place in the table, a place in shaping America's political future. But sadly and ironically enough, the New Deal's success planted the seeds for its failure. The New Deal was so successful that it created a very large, wealthy, and highly educated upper middle class that could see some potential benefits in pulling the ladder up, revoking Roosevelt's reforms, and ending the broad-based economic structures designed to create prosperity for all, in exchange for a less structured economy, which without the interference of government or unions would produce gains more intensely for a small slice of the population that was highly educated and already had firm positions within elite industries like finance and banking. So, by the late 1970s, the situation was turning for the anti-New Deal radicals, buoyed by a professional class that was increasingly turning against the New Deal and gaining large amounts of support due to an oil crisis which only worsened as Iran descended into the chaos of revolution. And no country or system could have coped well with the economic crisis caused by the oil shortage. Oil was at the center of the modern industrial economy, as it was essential not only for industrial production, but also for transportation of all goods within the system. With inflation growing year after year, conflict between business and labor spiraling out of control into strikes, and the Nixon and Ford administrations proving powerless to improve conditions, the radicals took control by electing Jimmy Carter as president.